Hey everyone, as always, Jarek here, and if you haven't seen my video last week about Homefront the Revolution, I would recommend you go watch that video, then come back to this one. This video is about Homefront the Revolution's expansions, so you may be a little bit lost. I'll put a link up there. Also, no, I'm not wearing the hat. It's been 100 for the last 4 days, and I have to turn my AC off to make this video. I'm sorry. Surprisingly enough, Homefront the Revolution got 3 expansions. I actually did not know this before I started making a video on Homefront the Revolution and didn't originally plan on making this video at all. These expansions are The Voice of Freedom, Aftermath, and Beyond the Walls. I'll go in order, starting with The Voice of Freedom. In The Voice of Freedom, you play as Walker, hence the name of the expansion, The Voice of Freedom. Effectively, the point of this expansion is to explain how Walker got to where he was at the beginning of Homefront the Revolution. So it's a prequel, if just barely. It's rather short and will only take you around 30 to 40 minutes. I was talking to my chat the entire time, so it took me 40 minutes, so if you're really paying attention to the game, it will only take you around 30. It's also not open world like the base game, it's just a linear game. At first, I was concerned, because for 5 minutes or so, you're just walking behind your NPCs doing what they tell you. I thought maybe the entire expansion would just be waiting for friendly NPCs to open up doors like the first Homefront game, but thankfully it doesn't do that. While the expansion itself is very linear, it doesn't feel like it's just one step above a quicktime event. It does feel like you're playing a game. And I'll be honest, I was impressed with the quality of this expansion. I wasn't blown away, but it was definitely better than the base game, as far as quality goes. Most of this expansion is spent in a subway, and it has a rather Metro-esque vibe. You'll also find that while you do fight the KPA at the beginning of this expansion, they aren't really your main enemies here. The enemies in this game are a group known as the 9-0. So you end up in a dark subway with a bunch of bandits that are setting traps. So yeah, it's pretty much Metro. And you know what, I'm okay with that. They even at one point are trying to kill you with an armored rail car. This has some serious Metro vibes. The reason you ended up in this subway is because that was the direct route to get to the safe house at the beginning of Homefront the Revolution. However, the 9-0 controls the subway and the door you need to access is locked. So you need to go to the end of the subway to unlock it so you can leave. While all of this is happening, the KPA are bombing the area and the subway is threatening to collapse. You fight your way through the 9-0 on your own, open the door, and then there's an escape sequence on your bike. At the end of this escape, a cutscene that is actually pretty cool plays. You get to see the beginning of Homefront the Revolution, but from Walker's side. So the opening cutscene where you were getting interrogated as Ethan Brady, you get to see Walker just bursting in and mowing them down. I don't know, it's always just really cool to see video games from different perspectives, say Half-Life, Opposing Force, and Blue Shift. But this expansion is honestly nothing to write home about. It's polished, it's fun, but it's only 30 to 40 minutes, and it might as well have been a very polished mod. The next expansion, Aftermath, is more or less the same situation. It's a 30 to 40 minute expansion that starts right at the end of the original Homefront. But the whole point of this expansion is to free Walker, who was still being interrogated. Really, the only thing to write home about with this expansion is that Ethan Brady now talks, which is so much better than the silent protagonist in the original game.
Sorry, Brady, but he has to die.
No! That is not what I joined up for. We have to be better than that.
I preferred it when you kept your mouth shut.
I don't mind silent protagonists. They can work really well. Half-Life has showed us that. But in the original game, there was no reason for this to be a silent protagonist. He almost got killed because he wouldn't speak right at the start of the game. So yeah, Ethan Brady having a voice is significantly better. I honestly really have nothing to say about this expansion. It wasn't a bad experience, it was well polished, they did what they were supposed to do, but it's literally just a rescue mission. You go one direction, find out that Walker isn't there, it was just a recording playing, you get directed to another direction, find Walker, and then take a helicopter and leave. That's the entire expansion. There's nothing more that happens here. I really feel like these 2 expansions literally exist just to fill in some plot holes to explain why Walker was where he was. But anytime I heard someone saying that the expansions for Homefront the Revolution were good, it was generally this last expansion, Beyond the Walls. And this expansion is indeed the best one without much competition. It's significantly longer than the other ones, although still not that long at around an hour and a half or so, but the quality is well, better than the base game. This expansion takes place after the base game. You have a foothold in Philadelphia and the KPA are trying to take back the city. This is when you intercept a distress call from someone claiming they're in NATO. This obviously is a big deal and you need to respond to it. The result is that you end up fighting through the KPA to leave the city, which is actually relieving because this is a very nice change in scenery. Seeing the constant gray, low textured rubble everywhere and virtually nothing else got a little bit bland. so being able to see some greenery and forest is really nice. It also gives you more space to fight the KPA, it's not just downtown blocks. Anyway, you end up fighting through the KPA and find this NATO individual hiding in the basement of a church. She introduces herself as Lisa Burnell. NATO apparently has a large force, a last-ditch effort coming to take over America. Lisa is an engineer for NATO, but the rest of her troop died. The reason Lisa's troops are as important as they are is because their troops were supposed to set off an old nuke that was sanctioned in an empty abandoned silo, still ready to be used, up to set off an EMP in orbit and knock down the KPA's satellites. Those satellites are controlling what they call the Apex systems, which would tear apart the NATO force on the beach. Apparently this nuke won't be detected if it's set off within their own boundary, but it will be elsewhere. It's a little far-fetched, but you do need to one-up the base game, and also the entire concept of Homefront is far-fetched, so why not? This kicks off a brief travel to that silo, and once you are at that silo, you find that it's just a barn. Apparently this silo was hidden so that the Soviets would never see it, and that's why this nuke is still there. You find your way inside, and then you have to turn on the power, resulting in a really annoying puzzle that just didn't need to exist. This puzzle has 6 different switches, you have to flip them in the correct order to turn on the power. If you put too much power into the system, it turns off, and you have to restart. I don't play a game like Homefront for puzzles like this. Puzzles exist in games to break up the combat, they're for pacing. But if you have a bad puzzle, that grinds that pacing to a complete stop, and it harms what it was trying to do. This puzzle sucks. Anyway, once you turn the power on, you have access to the nuke. As it turns out, some of the things on this rocket are damaged. However, you've been in the Revolution for a long time, and your guys are crafty, so they can grab a few spare parts in like 5 minutes. Alright, sure. Why not? Your guys take a barge across the lake to you to deliver the parts. You first have to clear out a ghost village, however, and this really highlights the best thing about this expansion. As I said, since you're no longer in downtown city blocks, it opens up the space where you can actually fight the enemies. This expansion is linear, but I feel like it's linear in the same vein that, say, Fear is. Getting from point A to point B is a straight walk, yes, and typically there's going to be some dialogue when you get there. However, whenever you stop for combat, the space opens up. It's more like a multiplayer arena. And this one really stands out to me. I can go into the buildings, I can go to the top floors, I can stay on the bottom if I really want to. I have so many options here that just anything can work. I feel like if the base game was treated like this, it would have been received fairly well. I don't think anyone would have been saying it's the best game around, but they definitely wouldn't be seeing it negatively. And, you know, also if it wasn't broken on launch, but that's not the point here. Anyway, once all the parts you need have been taken back to fix the rocket up, the KPA have figured out what you're doing and launch an attack. This is the final defense of the game, and I kind of cheesed it by having unlimited ammo with a rocket launcher and just fired rockets at everything. I feel like that was supposed to be a climax, but I mean, you give me unlimited rockets and I'm not gonna feel like I'm pressured to do much of anything but blow everything up. Nothing's a challenge for a rocket launcher, it's a rocket launcher! There's one last bit of drama at the end. You finally fixed up the rocket and it's ready to be launched. Sooner rather than later so that the KPA doesn't stop it. However, the rocket supports are not falling away, and Lisa cannot control them from the inside. You probably have predicted what happens here. Ethan Brady goes down into the silo, overrides the system so that the supports fall away, and at this point the KPA are breaking in. There's no time for Ethan to crawl away, you have to fire the rocket now. Lisa holds off on firing this rocket till the very last moment, gets shot, fires the rocket anyway, and Ethan Brady also dies. Regardless, you did it. The Apex system is offline, and NATO is free to come overtake America. Except for you never see this. The biggest disappointment I had with this expansion is that the most you saw were NATO jets flying overhead, and then it just fades to the title screen. That's it. You don't get to see NATO taking over America, the game just abruptly ends again. If not for this one thing, I would say this expansion is really good. But that's not rewarding. You don't get to see all the work you did. You don't get to see the result of what you were doing. Regardless, this expansion is definitely better in quality than the base game. I do feel a little bit disappointed that there's no open world elements in this expansion because I do like open world games and the base game was just urban Far Cry, which is fine by me, I love Far Cry. But either way, I will admit this expansion is pretty high quality and I kind of wish just all of Homefront the Revolution was like this expansion. As I said, if it was, more people would have liked it. But finally, that is it. That's all of Homefront. I've done Homefront, Homefront the Revolution, and now 3 expansions and there's nothing more. I could cover the co-op, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it at this. If you're interested in Homefront the Revolution, it's definitely not a bad game to play. Don't be expecting the best game you've ever played, but it's not a bad game to waste your time on. So that about sums it up. Again, thank all of you that joined me over on Twitch while I was streaming this. I had a pretty good amount of you watching, so apparently people were curious about this game at the very least. If you want to check out my Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. Same thing for my patrons over on patreon.com/Jarek4. Thank all of you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.